Commander Alexis Hart moved through the near-empty annex with the steady pace of someone who has spent a lifetime on watch. She was a Navy 05 and a 25-year SWCC veteran, brought in after hours as a consultant to evaluate the tactical simulation room before a demonstration the next day. She carried no personal sidearm. Her issued M18 rode secure with the safety engaged and UTM or SIM-FX marking rounds, locked in a retention holster beside a handheld radio linked to security forces. She worked the space like a pre-mission checklist. Emergency exit confirmed at roughly 15 meters. Nearest alarm pull station marked at about 30 meters. No live ammo policy posted and acknowledged. The HVAC hummed a low constant note, and the polished concrete threw back a faint sheen that could betray careless movement. So, she mapped the movable walls and barricades and noted where a silhouette would frame against them. She logged a routine sweep on the radio to leave a clean timestamp and let the room answer her with the quiet of an off-hour building. A shadow slid along a wall where nothing should move, slow enough to be deliberate and wrong for this time of night. She eased her steps, lowered her breathing, and set her back to solid structure, hands free and posture ready without touching the pistol, keeping identification and de-escalation first, because this was a training facility. The sound settled. The red exit sign bled across the floor, and she chose stillness while the corridor held its breath, waiting for her next move. Commander Alexis Hart measured her life in checklists and river miles. She came up through BCS, learned to breathe through doubt in cold surf, then earned her place in CQT with small craft, navigation at night, and crew drills that punish loose habits. Years followed on coastal and riverine missions that supported soft teams, inserting and extracting in water that hid sandbars and wire, where judgment and throttle discipline mattered more than noise. Her record spoke quietly. A silver star for a hard night that never made the news. A bronze star with V for leadership when a plan bent under weather and still held. A Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal for work that saved hours and maybe lives. Rear Admiral Linda Carver had shown her how to pair spine with listening, and how to fix problems without turning them into a stage. Tonight, the annex offered different water. OPSEC reminders lined the hallway. Range safety boards listed cold range rules, and the sim rooms repeated the same message about no live ammo. Her issued gear sat unremarkable on her belt. The M18 rode safe with marking rounds. The radio checked green. Her father's M1911 rested where it belonged, locked in a secure locker and kept as history, not as a habit. She carried a rule that never shifted. Standards stay firm. Culture learns to meet them. That was why she accepted the consultant job. Not to argue, but to show what right looks like at speed and under stress. She paused at the threshold, felt the building settle, and let a steady breath clear the last of the day before she stepped back into work. The briefing room ran on routine energy at midday. With mixed ranks settled into chairs and the projector humming, Commander Alexis Hart delivered a tight update on integration and respect, keeping it about standards, supervision, and training reps, not slogans. Sergeant Travis Cole, USMC E5, sat near the back with arms folded and eyes that measured her every word, offering a flat ma'am when called on and nothing else. She kept professional bearing and used Sergeant Cole in return, making clear that the standard does not move while culture learns to meet it. Outside the room, she passed OPSEC reminders and range safety boards for the sim rooms that repeated cold range rules and no live ammo. The posted duty roster marked Security Forces shift change at 2300, which reads as 11 o'clock p.m., and she circled the brief 10-minute coverage gap in the control room as a procedural risk to address before night operations. She checked her issued radio for battery and channel, felt the locked bite of the retention holster on her M18, loaded with SIM or UTM marking rounds, and touched the personal tourniquet mounted at the belt line as part of TCCC. These were small checks that guard against big mistakes. Cole's posture said more than his words. The jaw set, the glance that slid past her as if he might outweigh change, Alexis read the familiar mix of fear over lowered standards and fear of losing identity, then set it aside with a rule that kept her steady. Everyone is invited to meet the same bar. She logged a routine systems check, noted equipment returns, and stepped into evening prep with calm focus that ran counter to his simmering glare, letting the day move toward night on her timeline. Commander Alexis Hart let the routine sweep taper into a slower rhythm as she entered the tactical simulation room. Her mind ran the OODA loop without drama. Scan. Listen. Orient. Decide. The HVAC carried a steady hum that masked smaller sounds. Yet she caught the faint cadence of controlled breathing that did not belong to her. Her pistol stayed holstered with the retention engaged. Since the room was a no-live ammo space that used SIM or UTM marking rounds, she confirmed the emergency exit at roughly 15 meters and the nearest alarm pole station at about 30 meters. Movable walls, door frames, and barricades made a shifting maze. So she mapped lanes, dead ground, and angles where a body might silhouette. She chose a position with her back to solid structure rather than open space. She keyed the radio and logged her presence in Annex Sim Room 2, reported a possible unauthorized presence, and stated she was initiating a check. Then added that identification would come before any escalation. Low-light discipline guided every step. Her footwork softened on polished concrete, rolling heel to midfoot to forefoot to keep noise down. She drew air slow through the nose, angled her head to localize the breathing, and shifted weight a few degrees at a time, one hand free and the other near the holster for weapon retention without telegraphing intent. A shadow moved again along the wall, changing size as it crossed a pillar and flattening as it slipped behind a barrier. Alexis set her stance, hips low, shoulders quiet, eyes on the space where the figure would have to commit. She let the seconds stretch until the room settled around her. The next motion would decide the tempo, and she was ready to issue a clear command first. The room blinked to black as someone killed the main switch, and a few seconds later, the emergency lighting bled in red and shallow. The color flattened edges, stole depth, and turned the distance into a guess. Sound skated along the walls and pooled in corners where it did not belong. Commander Alexis Hart let stillness settle into her hands and feet, then let her eyes adjust without forcing them. Her pistol stayed holstered with the retention engaged because this was a no-live ammo space that ran SIM or UTM marking rounds. Identification came before force in a training facility. So she planted her back to solid structure instead of open space to deny a clean silhouette. A hostile voice rode the dark, claiming change ruins standards, and the room threw the words around like rubber balls in a small gym. She marked tone, cadence, and the way breath stretched between phrases. She issued a lawful order to stand down, voice even and inside the chain of command, and she kept it free of heat to favor de-escalation. She keyed her radio and reported she was in Sim Room 2. The lights were out, and she was attempting identification before any escalation. Breathing fell into a slow count. Her movement in low light stayed small and honest, so quiet it would not telegraph a rush or invite a flinch. Metal scraped and clattered as a pipe skimmed a rail to her left. A trick for a chase. She marked the probable origin and refused the bait, angling her head to localize the true position before she spoke again. A shadow crossed the wall from a different angle, larger now as it rolled off a pillar and slipped behind a barrier. Alexis reset her stance, weight set and hands free, ready to command compliance a second time rather than draw first. Sergeant Travis Cole burst from the dark with a metal pipe and a flat sprint that tried to force a mistake. Commander Alexis Hart kept the M18 holstered, with the retention engaged, and clamped her forearm to the holster side. Hips dropped, center tight. She stepped inside the arc of the swing to bleed power, used a forearm shield with safe head position, and felt the pipe skim air where her head had been. Her short elbow strike landed to the chest, stealing breath and tempo without chasing damage. Cole staggered, then reset with the quickness of a Marine who had cleared MC map basics and wanted to prove it. Alexis cut his lane with a balanced foot sweep that broke posture, framed the shoulder to steer space, and slid to stable cover without turning her back. Her voice carried lawful commands to stand down with no drama while her hands stayed open, one free for frames and posts, the other near the holster to guard retention without signaling a draw. She checked her breathing and kept it low, and even so, her timing stayed honest. Cole feinted left and snapped right, the pipe clipping her shoulder and ringing bone enough to demand a stance change. Alexis adjusted feet and hips rather than speed, used angles over force, and let pressure beat aggression in inches. Fundamentals held the line. Base and posture and clean frames that left no showy gaps for counters. And the holster stayed protected from grabs the entire time. Cole surged again with the pipe lifted high for a finishing blow, and Alexis set to redirect the strike, take balance, and convert the chaos into control as the clash tipped toward a decisive restraint in the next breath. Travis Cole overcommitted with the pipe, shoulders high and weight past his toes. Commander Alexis Hart pivoted inside the swing, redirected the arc with a forearm frame, and took his balance before it turned into power. She reaped his lead leg in a clean sweep that sent him down in a controlled slide rather than a crash. Her holster side stayed glued to his far hip, hips low, core tight. The M18, secure with retention still engaged in this SIM or UTM-only environment that forbid live ammo. Under red emergency light, Alexis flowed to knee ride across the upper back. Shin set, weight centered. She locked a 2-on-1 control on his right wrist, pressed the shoulder blades to the floor with measured pressure, and kept the neck free. Her commands were clear and even full. Stop moving. You are detained. Assistance is en route. She protected the holster with her near elbow and hip, let her free hand manage grips, and kept breathing steady. She ran a fast visual check for any holstered weapon on Cole and found none, consistent with sim room rules. The pipe spun away and clattered out of reach, and she left it in place for chain of custody. Her radio call went out with location, status, and a request for apprehension and medical check. And she held the position rather than try a solo transport. She breathed in through the nose and out through the mouth, and stated that she had multiple chances to escalate and did not, letting discipline read as strength. Emergency lighting held steady in red as security forces and military police entered the sim room in a tight stack and filled the corners first. They announced presence, cleared the space, separated the parties, and secured the scene while Commander Alexis Hart kept a safe control position until the handoff. The apprehension sequence ran clean, with a search for weapons in line with sim room rules and the metal pipe seized as evidence. A brief rights advisory followed, and a medic was requested to evaluate both individuals, with Alexis declining evacuation for a minor soft tissue hit to the shoulder. Lieutenant Colonel Aaron Miles arrived as the annex duty officer and confirmed status, addressing her as Commander Hart with steady calm. He took a concise report built like a SALT summary that covered size, activity, location, and time. Logged as 11:30 p.m. for 2330 to fix the record. Chain of custody began for the pipe. The lighting control log was tagged for review, and the radio call record was preserved. NCIS was notified due to joint Navy involvement and coordinated with JAG and Equal Opportunity channels to open a case. Alexis stayed on facts and avoided dramatics, keeping answers short and precise while security forces managed transport and further questioning. She confirmed no live ammo in the room and affirmed that identification was prioritized before force. The medic wrapped her shoulder and cleared her to remain on site. The room settled back into order as evidence bags clicked shut and signatures met forms. And she let out a steady breath as the action gave way to accountability. 3 days later, a formal review convened in a quiet auditorium at the annex. Vice Admiral Karen Whitfield sat with representatives from Marine leadership, JAG, Equal Opportunity, and NCIS to assess the record. The panel confirmed that Commander Alexis Hart followed annex rules and use of force guidance, issued lawful orders, prioritized de-escalation, and reported by radio in the proper format. Investigative materials entered into evidence included the lighting control log, the documented chain of custody for the metal pipe, and the recorded radio traffic. The chair spoke in measured terms that mission performance improves when diverse teams are built on firm standards. The panel noted that Alexis held those standards under pressure and that her decisions protected people and preserved process. Findings stated that she remained within policy at each step, from initial identification through the handoff to security forces. The record reflected clear sequencing and proper notifications without gaps. The panel then adopted the reform package proposed by Alexis. Integration training would be mandatory and would weave MC-MAP ethics scenarios into routine combatives, refreshers. A mentorship program would pair seasoned operators with units showing resistance and apply consistent expectations across ranks. Policy would enforce zero tolerance for harassment and threats with a clear reporting chain, while administrative fixes would close the control room shift gap, add redundant lighting protections, and require radio accountability checks every 30 minutes during night operations. The panel also addressed UCMJ implications for Sergeant Travis Cole, noting viable charges that could proceed to court-martial. A realistic pathway to a plea agreement remained possible and would include reduction in rank, restricted duty, and mandated rehabilitation and education duties, while avoiding any hint of leniency on the offense. As the hearing closed, the tone stayed institutional yet hopeful. Procedures mattered. Standards did not bend. And culture could improve through training and accountability, which set a quiet forward step for what would come next. The hallway felt quieter after the panel adjourned, bright with fluorescent light and the hum that comes when a building relaxes. Commander Alexis Hart walked past a scuffed stretch of floor with a go bag on her shoulder, the strap pulling at a tired muscle. Lieutenant Emily Rhodes fell in beside her, respectful and a little breathless, and thanked her for the example of restraint and professionalism. Alexis answered with the same calm she carried inside the room and used Lieutenant Rhodes like a guidepost in her tone. Emily used ma'am and commander the way the book teaches, and it fit the moment without strain. Alexis laid out the path as simple facts. BCS before CQT, water time, small craft, night navigation, and crew drills that punish loose habits. She kept it short and plain, more checklist than speech, and let the work speak for itself. The corridor buzzed, then settled again, and their footsteps found the same easy pace. Standards do not move, Alexis said without turning it into a slogan, and culture grows to meet those standards one honest rep at a time. She told Emily to prepare for the grind with real study, conditioning that stacks day after day, and humility that keeps you coachable when the cold bites. Emily nodded with that mix of nerves and resolve that marks a good start, hands tight on the strap of her own bag. They parted at the corner with a simple promise to meet again on the far side of qualification. Not as a favor, but because the standard was met. 1 month later, the annex hosted a scheduled professional development session for special operations candidates. The room felt orderly. Rows of chairs and a waiting whiteboard. By directive. Sergeant Travis Cole stood at the front in service uniform and faced a mixed audience from units. Commander Alexis Hart sat in the back row as an observer, hands folded and quiet, to ensure the message matched the record. He opened by accepting responsibility without hedging. He explained that he thought he was guarding a tradition, then admitted his actions violated the values he claimed to defend. He noted that Commander Hart had multiple lawful chances to escalate and chose control, which kept people safe and preserved procedure. He described the plea under the UCMJ that brought reduction in rank, restricted duty, loss of privileges, and mandated education duties. The facilitator confirmed consequences remain active and recorded, with continued oversight and required counseling. Cole affirmed compliance and answered questions plainly, without seeking sympathy or shifting blame. Alexis offered no speech, Only a nod that framed the session as accountability, not absolution. Candidates filed out quieter than they arrived. Carrying that growth starts with owning the record and meeting the standard forward. Commander Alexis Hart stepped out of the annex into bright Wyoming sun, feeling the building fall quiet behind her as if it finally exhaled. The gravel warmed under her boots and the wind carried a clean edge off the hills. Her phone buzzed with a note from her daughter that said "Proud" did not begin to cover it. And she read it, pocketed it, and left the reply for later because the moment belonged to the work and to everyone who would follow. She lifted her eyes to the mountains and settled on a simple truth that people should be judged by courage, skill, and discipline, not by gender. Hold that thought with me for a beat. When you are pushed, what do you choose? Do you chase the rush? Or do you stand inside the rules that keep teams safe and strong? Share your take in the comments. Tell me where discipline made the difference in your own day. And subscribe for the next story about de-escalation inside training environments where procedures and restraint save careers and lives.